Wait, don't buy a short-term rental, at least not yet. Not until you have listened to part 1 and 2 of the Real Estate Pessimist Podcast, where Kristi Kandel and me, Erik Stenbakken, talk about how the landscape has changed in the short-term rental market. Things are not now what they used to be. Doesn't mean you can't do it or you shouldn't do it. It just means you'd better know how deep the water is before you jump. Join us on the Real Estate Pessimist Podcast.
Welcome to the Real Estate Pessimist Podcast. I'm Kristi Kandel, and today is part 2 of our things you need to know about being a short-term rental owner. I am a real estate developer, investor, and I also teach people how to become the local developer in their community. And today I'm joined with my co-host, Erik.
Hey, Kristi. I'm an investor since 2010 in long-term and a portfolio of short-term rentals from Tennessee to Hawaii and in between, and produced the STR in an hour course, so literally 59 minutes. And yeah, we are going to dig into part 2 here. And it's, as we've said before, the name of the show is the Real Estate Pessimist, the good, bad, and the truth about real estate investing. That doesn't mean we're pessimistic, although day by day, sometimes that could change. We are going to dive into the next round of things that you should know about before you jump into short-term rentals. This is especially important because the landscape has changed. It has changed fast. If you've been looking at real estate and you got some old podcasts and people like, buy everything, refinance everything, well, that was probably because interest rates were at like 2.9%. Right? And prices were on the way up. This is different. And with short-term rentals, timing really is, well, and location. We can't avoid that. Location is really important, but timing is important. And today's scene is a little bit different. One of the things that has changed is guest behavior. And sadly, that has not changed for the better. Like before we even started recording, Kristi was sharing with me a little experience with a recent guest. Kristi, why don't you tell us about that?
We just got a review last night on Airbnb for a luxury vacation rental in Florida. And the guests said, in their review, they ended up with 3 stars, but the 1 star was for location. And they said, we could use the pool, we could walk to the beach, but because we got stuck in traffic, you get a 1 star for location. Okay. Pretty sure our listing doesn't lie where we're at, what's happening. Don't think we can control traffic. Gave you a pool, game room, gym, and beach access, and I guess that wasn't enough.
Yeah, well, I had a guest give me a bad rating because their baby cried in the car. Literally, somehow that's my fault that the baby cried in the car. I had a guest this week send me pictures, and they said, this is so dirty, I can't believe it. You know what the picture was of? The bottom inside of a trash can.
Oh my goodness.
And it wasn't really even that bad. It just hadn't been steam cleaned before their arrival. I'm talking like just a few crumbs on the inside, bottom, underneath the trash bag. Like they took the trash bags out.
Yeah, sometimes it makes me want to ask them, hey, can you send over a picture of the bottom of your trash can? And if ours is not cleaner than yours, I don't know. What do you want out of that? Do you want a whole cleaning fee refunded?
And this is the trouble, is as hosts, we can't do that. And so we just have to say, well, thank you for sending that picture over. We'll address that. And sometimes, I will say this, sometimes guests have sent me pictures of things where like, that's actually not right. Like my cleaners missed that, and that is not okay. But that goes to Kristi's point, is she's got a luxury property on the coast of Florida. I've seen many pictures of it. It is absolutely beautiful. I mean, it is the quintessential Florida coast luxury, let's just have an awesome time kind of place. So guest expectations are through the roof. I've got a couple of properties that have a pool indoors, and it costs a lot of money to maintain those things to keep up with guest expectations. One of the things that's happened over the last few years is that what used to be a luxury, a thing that's like, wow, this is incredible, I totally didn't expect this, now has become the standard expectation for everything. Like, yeah, fine. You got a coffee bar, you got gourmet coffee, you've got an indoor pool and a hot tub and a movie room and a game room, but you didn't have my favorite pay-per-view sports event paid, and I'm going to give you 3 stars. That actually happened to me.
And when I brought it to your attention, instead of you volunteering to pay a couple $100s for me to watch something specific to what I wanted, um, you said no. And so now I'm mad at you.
Well, and this comes up, in the review after they've stayed. And so our point here is that guest behavior and their expectations are high. What that means is you have to perform. It doesn't mean you should quit and not be involved in short-term rentals. It just means if you're really going to play the A game got harder, right? That's what we're saying. In 2020, you pretty much just needed a roof and a door and maybe a lock on the door. We bought one in 2020. It was a small cabin in the Smoky Mountains. It was managed by a property management company that by contract we were required to use for 6 months after purchase. Not a good property management company. Since then, they have gone out of business. But we figured, it was worth the 6 months worth of pain. We actually visited the property after they lost control of it, and then we took it over. We found something like 2 coffee mugs, 2 or 3, 4 plates, about 3 forks. And this is a cabin that was supposed to sleep 8 people. And the property manager hadn't done anything. And you know what? During this time, that cabin made the most revenue that we have ever had from that cabin. And that's because of the timing. It was just after COVID had hit and people were like, well, I'm not staying home and I'm not going to go to a hotel. I'm going to go somewhere where I can just stay with family. And so that drove the prices high and occupancy was high and expectations were low. It was just like, hey, you know what? If you've got a place, we'll take it. No problem. Well, those days are over. You have to play the A game because guest expectations are there. Now, I will say this, as you're doing your listing, make sure that what you're photographing and what you're putting out there is realistic, right? Don't paste in a photo of a beautiful sunset in the sky when actually behind you is a row of apartment buildings. Like, you can't do that. You can't set false expectations. And this goes all the way down to some people advise not to use charcuterie boards and pour wine and stuff like this and have that in your pictures, because guests can say like, hey, you showed me a picture of all this stuff. Where's my cheese and crackers? When I checked in, you showed me the picture, it's not here.
That's a very good point. We saw that across all of our properties, to where we went through and we even went back to our photographers and said, it looks like you put too much of a filter on this. Take this off. We want our photos to be 100% representative of what is in our listing, what is there. We don't want to give any false representations to where this is what you get. And we're providing a great thing, but we're just literally taking filters off of photos.
Yeah. And we've had to modify our listings like, oh, the guest broke the beach umbrella. And, I've been to the beach there many times in Maui, and there isn't a single hour that goes by that I don't see someone on the beach destroy a beach umbrella. It's blowing 20 miles an hour and they go ahead and set it up and bam, it's inside out just like that. So we have to look at the listing and change the listing and say, we don't say it's broken. We just delete that out of the listing. It's not available, because we want to keep it current. Because let's face it, one of my first experiences renting a vacation rental was here in Colorado, and they had a hot tub. And we were excited about it. We rented this place up in the mountains. We rented it because it had a hot tub, and we were excited about this. We were going to go with our kids. This was going to be great. And we got there and the hot tub was broken. We messaged the guest, the host. We said, hey, your hot tub is broken. He said, yeah, we thought that we were going to get that fixed. And you know what? This hot tub obviously had been broken for years. There was no way this was a recent thing. The thing was in total shambles, taken apart. And the host hadn't been honest about the condition of the property. So you have to do that. So part of this is guest expectations are going up, and part of this is on hosts, that you have to be honest about it, from your pictures to what your amenities are. So that's one of the things. One of the other things that's happened with guest behavior, I hate to say it, but I will, is the professional scammer. There are guests out there who make it a point to scam hosts. They know the key buzzwords for Airbnb, and there are a few. I'm not going to share them with you. They're always changing. But you say the buzzword, and all of a sudden, Airbnb is like, oh, yeah, sure, here's your whole money back. You had a free vacation on the host. And unfortunately, Airbnb, let's just be clear about this, is a business, and they make business by getting bookings, and they get bookings by just saying, hey, the customer is always right. In rare circumstances, they will side with the host, but man, you've got to have your ducks in a row if that's going to happen. And so during COVID, this started to happen. We didn't see it coming. We had guests say, all the linens are dirty. And it's like, oh, I can't believe we moved in. Now, keep in mind, this cabin I'm talking about sleeps 20 people. So there's a lot of linens. There's no way you could just like throw it in the washing machine, right? And they said, oh, the linens didn't get changed. They're all dirty. And we'll send a cleaning team over. Oh, no, we can't have anybody in the house. So you know what? We're going to wash all the linens and we'll take care of it ourselves. And you could leave clean linens outside. And this happened several times. And we're thinking, this is so odd. And then our cleaner told us that actually there's a series of TikTok videos circulating on how to scam hosts. And this is the scam right now. And well, we got burned a number of times because we felt bad. We're like, oh, our cleaners missed the turn. And so we better give the guests some sort of refund. We have since then transitioned to, in our listings, we say there are no refunds for maintenance or cleaning issues. Instead, we will deal with whatever issue happens immediately. And since then, also, we have an inspector come through the cabin and look at everything after the cleaners go out. Plus, we've got a handyman. Plus, we've got a pool service that comes independently. So we've got at least 4 teams that go through the property. And a guest saying, oh, you didn't get it right. Had somebody check in and said, oh, the pool is too cold. It's not as warm as you advertised. And I could say, oh, well, I'm sorry you feel that that's uncomfortable. I received a photograph of a thermometer in the pool this morning showing the pool temperature. The guest writes back, oh, okay, no problem. And that was the end of that issue. What we're saying here is that to be an A-game host, you really have to raise the bar for yourself, and you've got to stay ahead of these things, not just so that you don't get scammed. That's one reason, and it's a valid reason. But it's also so that you are actually literally providing what that guest expects. If they're shelling out, $300, $500, $900, $1,000 a night for a stay, it better be pretty nice, right? I mean, I would expect the place to be pretty nice. Things happen, right? But if things happen perpetually and you could fix those, that's on you.
And one thing we talked about actually a couple of weeks ago, I got some advice from you on a pool in Florida. We had listed in our description, we said there's a property comes with a heated pool, and we left it at that. Well, our heated pool was that we heated the pool to 84 degrees. What happened was in January, we had the great freeze across the United States, and even Florida got down to 30 and 40 degrees. So while the pool was 84 degrees the whole time because we have a solar cover on, we checked the temperature, and the guest said, oh, well, I would prefer it to be 90 degrees. Okay, if you've ever heated a pool, you understand that you get to a point where every degree makes that cost go up exponentially in your power bill. So because we were unclear in our listing, we said, look, we're sorry. And we had initially said, hey, it will be an extra cost of like $50 a week to heat the pool an extra 6 degrees, which would not have come close to covering it. And that ended up adding another $650 to our power bill. The guest complained, said, my sister heats hers to 90. You say heated pool in your listing. And we said, you know what? We're going to take ownership in that. We did not detail that out. So we will go ahead for the last 2 weeks of your stay, raise that to 90 at no cost to you. But we immediately updated our house manual, our listing, and our pool waiver that we have everyone sign. And we used the terms from Erik to say that our pool is heated to 84 degrees, which is set for active play. This is not if you're just sitting there floating and you want to be warm like a hot tub. This is if you're actively playing in the pool. 84 degrees is awesome. And we put in there then that for every week, if you want it to be up to 90 degrees, it's $250. If you want it to be up to 96, like it goes up, and that literally just covers our power bill. But we had unclear expectations. We will take the hit in this, and we will be very clear going forward.
Awesome. And that's part of matching guest expectations, setting guest expectations, which sometimes are unrealistic. Sometimes it's the host, sometimes it's unrealistic expectations, and sometimes it's just not clear exactly what they're getting. And like Kristi said, the reason that we have that in our listings is because guess what? We've had that. We've had those same conversations. Like, we need to be more explicit about what's going on. Right. Another thing you need to be aware of before you jump into short-term rentals these days, or if you're already in it and you're wondering what the heck is going on, is that the revenue isn't what it used to be. This is a really big deal. If you're getting expectations about what you should be earning, those expectations need to be current and realistic. I can't tell you how many times on Facebook groups, my wife's very active in those, and somebody will chime in like, well, I wouldn't get less than 30% cash on cash. Like, I could just all day long, that's what I get. And I'm a real estate agent, and in my market, I could help you get that. So we'll write to them and say, cool, send us a listing where you could get this. We'll have you represent us. Well, I mean, that was like 3 years ago, but I mean, I'm sure we could get, right? It's because people can talk on social media, and I've addressed this before. It is a pet peeve of mine. People can say anything they want to, right? They can say anything they want to, and you have no idea if it's true. And a 50-50 chance they don't even know if it's true or not, right? So you've got to get current information. And one of the bits of current information is that revenue is down. Now, you may see some stuff like, oh, Airbnb revenue is up and there's more demand than ever before. Yes, there's more demand. Demand has gone up. I haven't checked the latest stats, but let's suppose that demand has gone up 7% year over year, but inventory has gone up 18% year over year, right? You see that delta between there? That means someone's not getting those bookings. And that goes back to playing your A game and being in the business to really win it. And there are more people playing the A game than ever before. So you just need to know that there is a lot of increased competition out there when it comes to vacation rentals. Just having a door and a box of keys that you can hand out is beyond yesterday's news. And you've got to make sure you're looking at current numbers. Related to that, real estate agents, gurus, hey, I could tell you anything and I don't have to pay you the difference. If I said, oh, I think if you bought, in Tahoe, it's not even my market, right? That's Kristi's market. But if I went out and I said, oh yeah, with a 2-bedroom condo, you ought to be able to make X number of dollars. Well, guess what? If you don't make X number of dollars that you heard a guy on a podcast say, that's just too bad, right? And that's true of real estate agents. It's true of property managers. Now, I'm not saying that everybody's out to scam you. I'm just saying that you're the one. The buck stops with you. Caveat emptor, buyer beware. And so we're just saying is that you have to
do your due diligence and understand the market. Trust but verify is a good one, to where they will give you the information they've heard, but what you don't know from the people telling you is what silo or what background are they coming from to have gotten that information. So you ultimately need to do your own due diligence. One thing I noticed in our markets with the increased competition and the prices per night going down is there seems to be a threshold, and it's every single market. If you drop your prices below a certain nightly rate, you will get a certain type of guest that becomes not worth renting to. So we actually have found, and in the sense of, whether the less people pay, it sometimes seems the pickier they are, or in some areas it might create parties in other areas. So it's just understanding where that threshold is. And even though you're tempted to lower the price, to increase occupancy, to get an extra $50 for the night, be okay having your bottom threshold and not having someone fill that room for the night.
Yeah. And that goes to having margins, because Kristi's absolutely right. The cheap guests are the worst guests. And that's just it. So if that's you, look in the mirror, if you're the one like, I want a discount. I've only got $400 for this whole weekend and I want a place on the beach for a week during key week. Like, yeah, those are red flags that's going to be a bad experience for you as a host. Another thing that's happened, well, it doesn't happen just because margins are shrinking, is that this is not a passive income game. We hear on podcasts, it's just like, buy real estate and then just sit Mai Tais on the beach, because you're going to just turn this over to a team. The team's going to handle everything for you and you don't have to worry anything about it. You just scale. And that's how you're going to get this life of ease. Well, with shrinking margins, property managers charge you money, and that comes out of your bottom line. It actually comes out of your top line. And that is, and so as expenses rise, they get a percentage of all those expenses as part of what they charge. Now, I'm not saying that's unfair, because if they're doing it right, property management is a lot of work. You've got to be setting the prices at the beginning. You've got to be managing the listings. You're doing guest communication. You're working with coordinating the cleaning teams and maintenance and some degree of bookkeeping. There's a fair amount of work in this. And so if you look at this as just being passive and like, oh, I'll just get a team, I'll pass it off to the team, I'm not going to worry about it anymore, that's going to eat your profit margins. Now, this is not to say that it's a thing you shouldn't do, because maybe you're playing, this goes down to, a little bit later here, is you've got to know what game you're playing, because maybe you're playing the appreciation game. And then that's okay. It's hands off for you. You're not cash flowing, but you are not involved in it. And you're not worried about the revenue because that's coming from appreciation. Maybe you're playing the tax game and you don't need the appreciation and you don't need the cash flow, but you do need the tax break, right? So that's a valid game. You just have to know that going into it, paying a property manager is going to cost you money. Let's talk about appreciation just a little bit and how that used to work and what's happening now. Kristi, can you buy a place on Monday and flip it on Friday for a $50,000 gain? Is that a thing still?
No, it's not still a thing unless you're forcing appreciation. And it can happen, but it's getting harder and harder. And real estate is a business. So now it's figuring out how you're going to run your business and modify your business plan to make money.
Right. The days of wild appreciation, 50% appreciation year over year, in some markets we're approaching that. That's over. And not only is that over, it has retracted. What that means is if you bought at the peak prices, your place is now worth less than you paid for it. And so it's the thing you just got to be aware of. And the forcing appreciation, be cautious about this. I do know of a group, and I'll say it's anonymous, is that they'll say, oh yeah, you can get 30% cash on cash. But here's how they run the appreciation numbers in forcing appreciation, is they'll say, well, you buy it for $500,000 and you put 10% down. So it's $50,000. And then you put in $250,000 with our team of designers, and it's going to be amazing. And then in your first year, you make $100,000. It's 50% cash on cash because they're not counting your renovation costs into your cash on cash. They're only counting the money you put down to purchase the property. So you have just got to be aware that there's some tricky math out there making it look like forcing appreciation is some kind of magic wand, and it's magic plus $250,000, right? Which comes from you unless you just robbed a bank. So you've got to be aware that there's the magic numbers, there's the way people spread this stuff around, and quite frankly, it is getting more and more expensive to do those flips. Now you look at flippers, that row has gotten pretty tough to hoe. It's gotten hard. So just be aware of that. It's not to say it's impossible. There are still amazing deals out there. You can still force appreciation, but you have to know that
it might be a longer game. Right. It's a different game now. So maybe you buy a property that is dated and you update the bathrooms and the kitchen. Maybe you have an extra building and you're able to convert the garage or something into a game room or into a workout gym or something, and maybe put a loft above to where you have an extra living space. So when we're talking about forcing appreciation, it's the same rules as traditional real estate, but if you're now using it as a short-term rental, what you're doing is you're, in theory, increasing your revenue more than you would if you long-term rented and held it, while also waiting for the market to finish the appreciation game. So instead of immediate appreciation, if you can wait a couple years, get a little extra income from running it as a short-term rental, then you can sell it on the back end. Another way that you could do it, which you have to be very good at marketing, but you could create a brand around your property. And not all properties can do it, but if you have a unique property in the mountains on the beach, you could create a brand around it. And then potentially, if you increase the value enough, you could get someone to overpay for the real estate alone because they're actually buying the whole brand and you have reoccurring guests and customers to come. Now, that is more of a stretch. It's harder to do. But if you own a small business these days, you almost have to be an influencer. So that could be an additional thing that you throw in if you love playing around on social media.
Right. Relative to that, you have to remember that consumers may be willing to pay more for it, to buy it, to rent it, etc. But your real estate appraiser is not going to see the awesome reviews They're not going to see how many followers you have. They're not going to see the revenue that you have. Now, if a DSCR, if you're going for a loan like that, they might look at that, but your appraiser will not. And so you've got to be aware that there's these two parallel universes. You may be killing it over here, and your appraiser's like, yeah, but the place next door over there sold for X dollars. And you're like, yeah, but they don't have a pool, they don't have a hot tub, they don't have a theater in it. It's like, yeah, but their square footage and bedroom count matches yours, so tough luck.
Or if you decided that your property should be a, Wizard of Oz theme, and you create this awesome short-term rental that has rave reviews, and you go to sell it, and people who want to live permanently in this house go to buy it, they don't necessarily see the value of all the Wizard of Oz things that you have throughout the house and those amenities.
Right. They got to remove the yellow brick road because they're like, who would do this? Right. So there's all these parallel universes going on there, and you've got to figure out which one you're playing in and which one your buyer, which one your consumer's in. Speaking of consumers, consumer trends have shifted. That's number 4. This doesn't necessarily mean that it's a terrible thing and that it's a disaster waiting to happen, but it's different, right? Which goes into your marketing. To some degree, depending on where you are, it may go into your revenue. What's a consumer trend that you have noticed, Kristi, in your markets?
The different locations where people are coming from have changed during COVID. People were escaping to the mountains and the beaches. Now we're going back to more of our traditional travel, to where it's like, say in Tahoe, it's people from Texas, it's the Bay Area people who are coming in. And then we do get international travel. Before, we were getting people who were driving 3.5 to 6 hours. Those driving tourists are no longer coming, and we're going back to what our standard used to be.
Right. And there are companies that track this. STR Insights is one. AirDNA is another one that tracks some of these trends and so on. You can hit your favorite search engine and type in the appropriate search terms about consumer behavior changing. This would be a great place to use AI and look for changing trends. One of the things that's happening is guests are doing shorter stays, especially during COVID. They'll all just work remotely. Well, if you haven't noticed, we're here recording in 2025. The work at home thing is kind of fading, right? There's some pushback to get back into the office and get going. And so those stays where people can say, well, we're going to homeschool our kids and we'll just work from the beach for 6 weeks, those things are getting more and more rare. And so stays are getting shorter. And another big difference is our booking window is getting shorter. What that means is that guests are booking way closer to date. If they want to have a vacation on the beach in, let's say, a little bit off season, especially in the off season, and they're going to go down in, let's say, February, which is kind of a slow time. But if they're going to do that in February, they might have in the past booked that in November or maybe December. Well, now they might wait until January to book a February stay, or they might even wait till the beginning of February to book a mid-February stay. And so that's just a changing consumer behavior. And that might sound like, it's all the same, right? Mm-hmm. Yes and no, depending on your platforms. Because when a guest books, depending on how you use your OTA, which is how you manage all your bookings, and whether you're integrated with that, when they book, you get the deposit, depending on the platform and depending on how you're booked in. If you're used to them booking 3 months in advance, you're used to getting that income 3 months before they stay, at least their deposit portion, right? And so if consumer behavior has changed and your peak season is, let's say, June, July, August, and now your guests aren't booking until April and May, well, what used to be your income in January, February, at least part of your income from their deposits, what used to be your income in January and February and got you through those super slow months is now gone. Right? You just don't have that income because now they're booking for peak season later in the year. And although at the end of the year, your revenue numbers might look the same, you could have some really thin months where you used to be getting bookings ahead of time. See, so it's a little bit more like chess than checkers when it comes to some of these things that at first don't seem obvious and apparent. So we've seen consumer trends.
That's where, as you're running a business and you see those changes, you have to maybe change your strategy on how much reserves that you hold back, to where you go, okay, we normally have X amount in reserves, but now that the deposits are coming later into the cycle of the year, then we might double that, or we might do something different because we know what the peak season, we know what the off-peak season are, and we know what we need to get through to pay our bills. Because ultimately, when you're running a business, you don't want to always be worrying, do I have enough money to pay the mortgage or the utilities? So by planning ahead and understanding your numbers, you can go into that confidently and make sure that the reserves match that.
Right. It is a business. And one of the things with business, as we hear constantly, scale, scale, scale. And let's face it, if you've got one gumball machine and it makes $10, you're going to make more if you have 10 gumball machines, each making $10, right? So people want to do this with homes also. But this is point number 5. That's gotten a lot harder. Money, this is maybe stating the obvious right now, but it's something you should just be aware of, because we have the echoes from all of this past talking about the boom in short-term rentals. And we think like, it should be easier. It should be better. It should be faster. Okay, if you could jump in a time machine 3 years ago, you know what? Go for it. I'll join you. Okay. But I don't have a time machine. And so what that means is that right now scaling has gotten a lot harder. Obviously, prices are up. The cost of money is up, and the increased competition is up. That's normal, right? We don't like it. We want it to be decreased competition and high income and low costs and so on. But real estate, if you've taken more than a 90-day look at it, is cyclical. It just is. It goes up and down, and you can read the books from people who bought in 06, 7, 8. And I'm going to encourage you to do that. Actually listen to people who have been in the game more than a couple years. And I started saying this in 2020, 2021. I said, this is going to go badly for some people, because some of the loudest voices were some of the newest voices. And the only thing they had ever seen was win, win, win. Well, you know what? You get a short enough period and you think that's how it is. And you think that that's what the future is going to be. It's kind of like when I started playing golf. I was like, this is pretty easy, actually. I just stand up there and whack the ball, and like it just goes where I want it to. Okay, it doesn't stay that way. Right? And real estate is the same. It is cyclical. That is normal. The get rich quick thing, well, if you're in the right part of the cycle, that can work. And it did work for a lot of people. But you should know that it's not always been that way. It will not always be that way. And certainly right now in our cycle, it isn't that way. Now, not to say it's impossible.
It's just harder. And I'm a big fan of going back and being a sponge and learning from history, because so many times we hear people say history repeats itself. And I wonder, well, how can it? If we have this data, how can history repeat itself? Well, it's just like third generation of wealth. The money that the first generation earned is then gone by the third generation. If you weren't the one who experienced it, you don't remember it. And if you think back even through your own life of the different things that have happened over that time, I play beach volleyball with people who don't even remember 9/11. Whereas I know exactly where I was at when I heard that happen. So my life is different when I think about airplanes and airports and things like that. And they don't have those same responses. So going backwards, listening to the good and the bad. And another thing, whether it's short-term rentals, midterm, long-term, if an operator says, hey, I'm doing this and I have a syndication, or do you want to joint venture? I will see how far back their experience goes, because if they have not taken a project full life cycle and they have a bunch of deals in the honeymoon phase, then I know their operations and their exit strategy have not been completed yet. So they haven't learned the full lesson. They haven't gone the full cycle. So just, again, trust but verify everything you hear out there. And if people are talking about it, there's probably something good about it. But make sure you understand and go in eyes wide open.
That is 100%, 100%. And on that note, if you want to get a whole good read on this and get your head really around what Kristi was talking about, Morgan Housel's book, The Psychology of Money, speaks exactly to this. The short version is everybody sees money differently, and you think you see it the same way, and they're crazy for seeing it the way that they do. But you both see it that way, and you both have reasons. Also talking about the unforeseen things, he talks about black swan events and how unforeseen they are, except he says they happen all the time. They happen regularly. We just don't know what the thing is going to be. Is it going to be the oil embargo of the 70s, making gas prices insane? Is it going to be recession in the 80s? Is it going to be a 9/11 event? Is it going to be a COVID? We don't know what it's going to be, but it will be something. And if you're acting as if something will never happen again, you're probably not lined up for winning. Well, those are our quick summaries. Well, maybe not quick, but that's our summaries of what you should know about before you jump into STRs. I'm still in them. I still own them, still run them. Kristi's still in the business. I'm not selling out. So this isn't me just saying, don't do it. And by the way, you can buy mine as I exit. I'm staying in it, but beware of where you're getting your news, how current your news, what your news source benefits by telling you this. Because if your news source is like, the Outer Banks are the most awesome place. It's like, it's incredible. Revenue's never been amazing. Oh, by the way, I just put up a listing in the Outer Banks. Would you like to buy one? Just, think twice about that is all we're saying. And keep these things that we've talked about in mind. As Kristi said, eyes wide open. And that is our goal here with the Real Estate Pessimist Podcast, the good, bad, and the truth about real estate investing. We hope you join us for another one of our podcasts. The highest compliment we could receive is that you forward one of our episodes to somebody that you know and think could benefit from it. And leave us a review. That helps us get some traction. Thank you for joining us. Can't wait to talk to you again.